Welcome, everybody. Joe Tarnowski with ECRM, and my guest today is Natasha Fagri, the co-founder of Frost Popsicles. So in addition to being a Range Me member, Natasha has also participated in ECRM's frozen and global wine, beer, and spirits programs because her products span both. They are frozen, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic frozen popsicles. So on top of this, she is also a member of Ali Ball's Retail Ready group. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Ali Ball, I interviewed her a little while ago where she talked about the 5 steps to a perfect virtual buyer presentation. And Natasha followed those 5 steps in her ECRM meetings with buyers, and they worked out brilliantly. So we're going to get into a little bit of that in this interview as well. So Natasha, thank you so much for joining us. And to start off, give us an overview about your company and the products.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Joe. I so appreciate it. It's great to be involved. So to give you a bit of an overview, so my products, as you mentioned, and the main ones we'll be chatting about today in relation to ECRM and Ali Ball are our popsicle range. So Frost Popsicles is a range of 7 all-natural alcoholic poptails, as we like to call them, and non-alcoholic frozen palettas. Our whole product proposition is to make something different and unique, both in terms of the packaging and how we do business, and obviously the flavor profiles we present to market. Our products are non-GMO, and we've also got vegan-friendly and gluten-free in our range. We actually launched the whole product proposition originally in South Africa, which is my home country, in 2016. But the goal was always to get to the US, and mid last year, just in time for the craziness of COVID, we arrived in California, and that's very much been our focus to now grow and establish our brand presence and our product using California as the springboard state and just growing from there. We want to bring pops to everyone, Joe.
Well, I'm looking forward to you coming to New York.
But definitely, that's on the list.
So what gave you the idea for these products?
Well, I think, to be honest, it was a couple of things. The first thing was I was actually in late 2015. I was on a business trip, and I saw a concept overseas, actually in Europe, that I thought, this is interesting, but it's something that I felt that myself and my business partner could do differently and do better. Now, to give you some background, my background is strategic marketing in a commercial environment. My business partner, John Mark, who's currently based in South Africa, his background is finance and equity. So none of us came from food science or anything like that. But I think it's that entrepreneurial sort of hunting spirit. You see something and you're like, oh, I could do that. So it was seeing a concept and wanting to improve upon it. And we went into 13 months of product development. We launched with 2 products. 5 years later in the South African market, we've got 9, of which we've initially launched 7, 4 of the alcoholic and 3 of the non-alcoholic in the US. So the business has just grown, and we see real opportunity in this market for private label opportunities, as well as for some very cool limited edition holiday popsicles as well. So watch the space. There's more to come.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. And tell me about your distribution here, because you're relatively new to the US, so you're just getting your footing. Where are you distributed right now?
So distribution for us, oh goodness, it's a constant learning curve, and it certainly is a challenge because our product actually straddles 2 categories in the market, alcohol and grocery. And anyone who knows the US market knows the volume of gray hairs that having an alcoholic product and all the different rules and regulations that go into that. So at the moment, we're really in the early stages. We're in a few small independent stores in Southern California, but we kind of had to completely pivot and readjust our expectations and strategy for last year because of how COVID-19 impacted the way that buyers could actually interact with potential new vendors, and just in terms how the stores were taking on new products. And we'll get to it, but that's really where ECRM was kind of pivotal in assisting us. So we kind of used our launch period, which we hoped would be a little bit more about hitting the ground running, to build relationships and engage with buyers and get onto their scheduling review lists to take on our product for Q1 and Q2 this year, because everything was so disrupted. And as I'm sure you can attest to, there is nothing worse than a vendor who's pushy and doesn't understand the struggles and challenges that times in which we find ourselves in. Also, if they affect buyers, and we need to be sympathetic and responsive to that as a brand.
Definitely. And I know, especially in the early stages of COVID, buyer review schedules got all screwed up, all delayed because
Absolutely.
it was all hands on deck to help the all of the essentials categories. So you had buyers driving trucks, making deliveries, doing all these different things. So it got all, yeah.
Buyers, buyers couldn't get into stores. And look, I firmly believe that an alcoholic popsicle is a must. It's an essential, but in the grand scheme of a global pandemic, it's kind of not. So we just had to readjust, which is fine. I think any business, you got to be able to pivot and move and be flexible. Yeah. It's what keeps you going.
Well, yes and no. I disagree. I actually think now is a good time for them because with people stuck at home, not going out, it's another option.
And I think something that we've realized as well is it is a big ask. And again, this is where I think ECRM played a massive role. It is a huge ask to take an established industry. Let's just say if you take off-premise consumption, so your traditional liquor and grocery store, to get them almost overnight to start operating in a virtual space in terms of how they engage with potential new brands and clients like myself. It is a big thing. This is an industry that's used to me being able to walk into a store to meet a buyer that I've made an appointment with a physical sample, and all of a sudden everyone's displaced. So having platforms like ECRM, where once the buyer's caught up with exactly what you've said, let's celebrate the products that people can buy at their local store and take home and enjoy. So whilst we can't go out to events and do our usual socializing, the pops can bring the party home. And having platforms like ECRM, where kind of the ship can keep sailing in a virtual space and buyers can be exposed to products, is just, for me as a product creator and business owner, it's been a lifesaver.
That's great. So in the frozen section, so where do your products sit? Do they all merchandise together in the frozen section, or how does that work?
So it entirely depends on the licensing of the respective venue. So if we just look at California, because looking at all the different licensing legislation in 50 states, we'll die a slow death on this podcast. But we just look at California. If a retailer, so like a grocery store, and Whole Foods is a great example, if the entire retail store holds a spirits and a wine license, then my full product range, the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic, can be merchandised side by side in their freezers next to their non-alcoholic frozen ranges. And obviously, in order for my product to even be where it is here, we had to comply with every federal and state requirement in terms of the warning labels and the packaging. So there's never any confusion about what's for the grown-ups and what's for the kids. If, for example, it's an environment that is not licensed for wine or not licensed for spirits or not licensed at all, that's where obviously we look at our product mix and we say, okay, great, this is the environment that the spirit line can go into, but not the wine line. Or this is, say, perfect for our non-alc frozen palettas, but the alcs can't go in there. So I think having a range that straddles both categories, while sometimes it can be tough, more often than not, it's a huge benefit.
No, that's good. It's good that you have those options. And so how did you get familiar with ECRM and Range B? I know you work a lot with Ali Ball. So, and as I mentioned before, we do a lot of work with her. In fact, she's doing a webcast tomorrow with Range B about product certifications, and
I'm dialing into that. Actually, I've got that in my diary.
Excellent. Well, I hope to see you there. I'm going to jump in there too. And so I know you do a lot of work with her. So how did this all come about?
So how I actually heard about ECRM, I actually had registered with Range Me about June, July, about 3 months before I ever knew that Ali existed. And through my Range Me premium membership and getting exposed to ECRM, how I found you guys was through Range Me, and how I found Ali was through a interactive webinar that was hosted with ECRM where Ali actually featured. So it was kind of like a perfect storm, and the timing couldn't have been better, to be honest, because I wasn't actively searching, call it, for an Ali bull. I mean, the US market is so big, but I'm someone who's always keeping my eye on, resources and information. And how I found out about Range Me was honestly, it was pure and total research of what channels do me, whether I was a local vendor or an international breaking into the local market, what channels do I need to be on to get products to see me? And I was researching a lot of the brands that we wanted to work with, the retail chains, and a lot of them on their website would say, you got to have a Range Me profile. I'm like, what is this Range Me? And that's how we got to where we are.
Yeah, most of the big retailers have that. So where Range Me, just a background for anybody who's listening who's not familiar, Range Me handles the inbound product submissions process or management for most of the top food retail chains and several beauty retailers as well. So when you click, if you're on the retailer's website and you click the link to submit a product for consideration, it'll take you through the Range Me platform where you have to build your profile, and you can do a basic profile, and Natasha has a premium profile, which has other benefits with it. But through there, it's routed to the appropriate buyer, and then they can evaluate the product. So you went in through there, got familiar with Allie, and Allie, I think it may have been a Range Me podcast with her, but I know,
yes,
we collaborate on a lot of different things. So then from there, you found out about the ECRM virtual sessions as well.
Yes, so I actually found out about the ECRM virtual sessions because I was on Range Me, and obviously I'm then on the database, and I requested that I be kept up to speed on certain things. I got an email alert about these virtual sessions, and what's so great is, and it's one of the things, and again, just to make it clear to anyone who's watching, I'm not paid by ECRM or Range Me or endorsed in any way. I'm really purely speaking from my own personal experience, and I'll never promote something I don't believe in. But the thing that I really liked was I got this email. I immediately reached out to one of the ECRM staff members who obviously had sent the mail and got full details on, oh my goodness, there's now this platform. If I just talk about like the global wine, beer, and spirits buyer, platform, which is in response to not being able to have the physical road shows, where for what I felt was a very competitive fee, I could have insight before even committing to take part of what retailers and accounts are going to be on these calls, whether it was for frozen food or the global wine, beer, and spirits. Is it relevant to my company's strategy? And then obviously also have that tiered option of, do I want to do the 5-minute pitch option versus the 10-minute? What can my budget afford?
Yep. Or the 20. We have a 20-minute too.
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then what I thought was fantastic was after you've actually registered, to be able to submit materials that then the buyers or potential distributors can review in advance, and then they say, I want to be presented to by this brand. I cannot stress enough what an incredible hurdle that helps you accelerate through it, because you've already got an interest from the person you want to pitch to, that they're actually saying, yes, I want to hear more. You're not kind of wasting your time. So I did the 2 programs that I sat across actually ran across similar days. So I did about 30 buyer pitches. I took the 5-minute option because I also believe you've got to be able to deliver something quickly, or else you don't know your stuff well enough. I did 30 to 35 pitches across, I think it was 3 to 4 days, which is quite intense. But it was incredible. It is, I've got all my leads from there. I am following them up regularly. I would recommend it to anyone who wants authentic FaceTime with a buyer in a virtual landscape.
Well, thank you for that. And it's obvious you are a very smart user of the platform. And the reason why I say that is you were well prepared, and we're going to get into that part of it too. But there's so much importance that we place on the prep, and we have somebody there on hand to take you through it, familiarize you with the system, the ability to get all your documents in order and in front of the buyers right away before you actually meet with them live. So, I mean, you did all of the right things, because if you don't do that and you just wing it, it's not going to be the same experience.
100%. And anyone who knows me, both personally and professionally, knows, yes, I can be adaptable, but I am the world's biggest planner. I do not like surprises that could have been avoided. And I'm also a believer of, if you've got especially a platform I'd never been on before and a process I wasn't familiar with. If you're not going to work and use the resources at your disposal, you're never going to fully be able to appreciate the benefits. And especially doing like the live coaching call with the ECRM representative, where I actually sat on, and it was like they were the buyer. So I'm like, okay, this is the interface. This is how I load up my profile. You also go into what is a pretty nerve-wracking environment. 5 minutes to pitch to buyers back to back is intense. And if that was the first time I'd seen the platform and not knowing what to expect, I think I would have had a heart attack. I mean, winging it is not an option. It's crazy. You won't get the full benefit.
No, and it's great. And everybody does get a meeting with our client success managers. They ensure that everyone is prepped. Their settings are optimized, their video, their audio, everything is good to go.
And what I liked is they even went so far as to, obviously I had set up, okay, this is where I'm going to pitch, and I'd actually put empty packaging. I kind of stuck it to the wall above me, and they look and say like, yeah, we think that's great, or it's a bit distracting, or there's not enough light in the room. And I mean, that's invaluable. That's just, and I'd never done virtual buyer pitches before, so it was super helpful.
The cool thing about having hosted more than 80,000 face-to-face meetings on the platform already is that our team has become experts on what works and what doesn't work in these pitches, whether it's your setup, whether it's the lighting, the way you present. So it's pretty cool. And I think a lot of people don't realize, sure, we have an amazing platform. Our digital team is top of the line, but the human element behind the scenes is just as important because it guides you through.
And also write down, I think, to in-call tech support. I think I had a couple of calls where the one was the buyer was struggling to log in. And of course, once your little ticking timer starts, you're like, where's this guy? And I immediately knew, click on tech support. Woman popped up. She's like, don't worry, we'll track him down. And they found him. And then another case, they couldn't find the person. She hadn't dialed in. So then the woman, don't worry, we'll end the call. We'll reschedule. It was set up for a month later, which I just think is, I mean, that's like first class setup.
We make sure no one misses a meeting. And especially if it's not your fault.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing is we want to make sure we're on hand, even during the session. There's a dozen or more people watching a dashboard to keep an eye out for those customer service calls, or just to see, sometimes they're proactive. We'll do observations of meetings where we'll pop in and out. Not, you can't see us, but we'll observe the meeting to make sure it sounds good. And if like somebody's sound is messed up, they'll pop in the meeting and say, hey, I hear your headsets, there's a little bit of an echo. Try this and you'll get a better sound. Boom, then they're out of the meeting. So just so they're very proactive, because the experience is everything. It's we want to make sure that you get the max that you can. And the other part of it is the prep that you did, which was amazing. And I want to walk through that because you followed all of those 5 steps that Ali Ball talks about, the 5 steps that I talked to Ali about on our podcast. And so let's walk through that a little bit. The first step, identify your why. What was your why? How did you do that?
So I think, that's probably the most important step. And for us, kind of my why was, it's bringing a unique product proposition to the market to leverage off what is aggressive global growth in a fairly new category. So that's my why as to why we created this product. And then obviously it's to, how do I articulate to the buyer so that my why benefits their bottom line? And Ali's steps to awesome virtual pitches, they just elevated what I had prepared like exponentially. From identifying the why to then going on to preparing your materials, again, which speaks to your point, Joe, it's totally critical. So what I did was, I did a first draft of my digital presentations. Obviously, I had 2, one for each program. There was a lot of crossover information, but there was also some specific to frozen that wouldn't necessarily apply to the global wine and beer and spirits program. And then obviously I had them all designed up by our graphic designer because I wanted them to look on brand and professional. I then sent them through, actually, I shared them on the Ali Ball closed Facebook group for comments and feedback from people to say, guys, what do you think? Because that's also the benefit of being on the course with Ali, is you've got this forum of like-minded professionals, and we're all kind of in the same boat.
And the course she's referring to, by the way, is the Retail Ready course.
Yes.
I'll put a link in the post for that, because it's very helpful for a lot of our suppliers that we work with.
And then in addition to the preparation, obviously after getting feedback, and if there's anything that I felt was relevant to tweak, what was most important is I actually prepared speaking notes. Now, it's not about talking off speech cards. That's a terrible idea. Don't do that. But when you've got a very controlled time limit that you've got to pitch in my case, it was 5 minutes, and you've got to get through key information that speaks to the buyer. Not what your mom thinks is cool, not what you think is interesting, but what actually speaks to the commercial objectives of the buyer, because that's all they care about. How is your product going to make them more money and not cannibalize their bottom line? I actually had my speaking point. So when I had my setup, so like I'm talking to you now, my computer was in front of me, and I had two little easels on either side, and I had speaking notes. So when I was presenting, I could glance. So I knew what I was saying, but you don't want to ever hit a brain freeze, because brain freezes waste time. So I could glance, and I knew this is what I've got to say on that slide. Then I click. This is what I've got to say on this one. Okay, on this one, I'm sharing a screen because I'm showing a cool video. And then I practiced. I mean, my business partner got the pitch. My dog got the pitch. My boyfriend got the pitch. I think the neighbors heard the pitch. And obviously setting the scene tied into that. We were all working from home. Because I was in South Africa at the time, and the course was run on Eastern Standard Time, I was 7 hours behind. No, I'm lying. I was 7 hours ahead. So most of my calls were done, obviously, in the evening, starting at like 5:30 in the evening, my time. So I was sitting in my kitchen, like I had a blank white wall behind me, well lit. I had my product. I'd actually stuck with, what do you guys call press stick here? I never remember the brand names, but stuck with like a sticky substance to the wall, so that if you were talking to me, you could see what looked like floating popsicles. Yeah. And so they were immediately getting a sense of, oh, what's that? In addition to seeing the product in my presentation, as I said, I'd scripted it out, but by the time it came to delivering, it was like a conversation. And the most important thing I can say about the script is, if you've got 5 minutes, don't talk for 5 minutes. Talk for 3.5 and leave the 1.5 minutes at the end for the buyer to ask questions. Because how I tended to end it was, here are my direct contact details. They could see it on the screen. I had theirs. You can reach out. I was going to reach out anyway straight afterwards with a little follow-up email with the presentation. But I wanted to give them live time on that call to ask me anything pressing, because I also think not a lot of people remember that. You get so focused on sharing everything you know that you forget they also want to know some stuff, and you don't know what they want to know.
Yeah.
And I think as well, just coming into the final step of practicing, the more you practice, the more comfortable you are delivering the information, and the less you feel like you need to speed through it like a racehorsing commentator. Yes, I had 5 minutes, but I can't be like because it's overwhelming, as intense as it was for me to pitch back to back. And sometimes I would do 5 pitches and then have like a 15-minute break, or on a more chilled evening I might have an hour in between after a couple. But it's intense for the buyers. They're getting like talked at, and they're humans, they're not robots. They want to feel like they're having fun. So I always used to try and throw in a bit of a joke and things like, guys, I've got lollies that'll make you jolly, and silly little things, because it just breaks it up. And don't show boring spreadsheets. Keep it fun. Keep it fun. And that all comes into the practicing and preparation of it.
That's a good point. Now, did you do your research on the platform about the buyer's needs and objectives and factor that in?
Absolutely. So obviously, when I first reviewed the list of buyers prior to even committing to the program, that was the motivator behind wanting to be a part of the programs. I was like, these are buyers I want to get in front of. Then obviously, one of the benefits of the platform is once you're in and registered, you can actually read about every single buyer that you're presenting to, the position they hold, what is their name, and what are they specifically looking for. So, you might be presenting to a buyer, but all he wants to hear about is private label, in the frozen space for the Southwest region. And then obviously there's always a little write-up on the company or brand that he represents. And I would, again, going back to, and I'll keep saying it, going back to the preparation, you have to do that homework. You cannot go in, because there were many brands that I hadn't heard of before, but on further research, I'm like, this is absolutely the type of company we'd love to work with. But I need to have some knowledge around what their objectives are, because whilst my presentation is the same for everyone, key little extra nuggets that I'll throw in for a Gelson's might be different to what I say do for a Ralph's, just as a pure example.
And that's great. And for people who are not familiar with our platform, we have a prep site. So anybody who registers, it's the site that has a bunch of resources. It has some of the videos. I think Ali's video is on there now with me. And as well as all of the buyer information and their needs and objectives. So this way you can prepare, and if you need to tailor things, just like Natasha did, you could tailor them to each buyer. So that's great. And then I think, I mean, you're a pro already at it. I mean, you're using it exactly the way it's meant to be used. And, you did a lot of practice, and which is, again, we recommend that again and again and again, because especially in the 5-minute meetings, you want to nail it in 3, maybe 3.5, half a minute to 2 minutes for a Q&A if the buyer needs it. So how were your meeting experiences themselves and your use of the platform? Which bells and whistles did you take advantage of?
So, well, firstly, I have to say overall, the meeting experiences were fantastic. And there were a couple of key points that I wanted to note. What I really liked was, as I said, because I was sitting across 2 programs, what I liked was I would have, it was kind of halfway through each program, I would actually get a video check-in with an ECRM staff member where, exactly as you've just asked, they wanted to know how it was going. Had there been any issues? Had there been any dramas? What was also great is when I was reviewing my schedule of meetings, I picked up a couple of clashes of things I wasn't sure of. ECRM corrected them immediately, because shame, whoever had to schedule my meetings, it was a tough one, because it was coinciding programs, and it was a fantastic job. What I really liked for me, which was a high point as well, is when you're presenting, you've obviously also got, it's super easy to share screen. I mean, that's kind of a basic thing that everyone knows, but things like being able to actually make notes on the platform during meetings. So I could make notes and then save them. So when it comes time to me doing a post review after meetings, there's almost what looks like a little spreadsheet running where I can see this was the note I made against that buyer. So it could have been something as simple as, be sure to send sell sheets when I send this presentation to them after the call. I mean, obviously also having, what was absolutely invaluable to me was great doing the presentations, but having access to that database of, this is every buyer's name who I presented to, this is their role, this is their address, their contact number, their email, and their division. Ask any brand trying to break into a market. That is some of the hardest information to come across, and to know that what I had through being a part of the program was relevant, up to date, and the actual people I met or the division that I engaged with, for me, that was a real high point. And then, of course, just the interactivity, as you mentioned, Joe, of that user dashboard where I could upload my materials that buyers could review. I could create a personal profile for myself, so they're getting a sense of me, my product, my business. I could add in links down to my social media links if I wanted to, any kind of supporting material like product brochures, websites. I just think that's so important, and it gives you and your brand a personality before the buyers even met you.
Yep, and that's the thing. We want to make sure everything is there before, during, and after. So afterwards, we have the follow-up site that's tailored to that, and which is what she was just talking about. And we want to bring it full circle so that we're with you all the way. So
there was something I actually did want to mention that I really feel you guys go above and beyond, is in addition to the standard post-program, call it debrief, which I had, there was also then the option that should I want to take part in the programs this year, as a previous participant, I actually got afforded a secondary participation discount, which is amazing because if there are additional buyers that I feel are relevant that I didn't engage with the last time because they didn't take part, but I want to do this year's, which I think are coming up in April, I know that I can do it, and there's a discount because I've already taken part, which I just think is such a great added perk.
Yeah, well, we got to take care of you guys. So how are your follow-ups going? You don't have to mention any retailers that you're working with, but now you're in that process, knee deep in that process.
Definitely. Follow-ups are going really, really well. So we've secured some business that's coming on board now the end of this quarter with them, which is awesome.
Excellent.
But I think the most important thing about follow-ups is exactly that, as I said, having those direct contact details, and also now getting it straight from the horse's mouth, i.e. the buyers, like, please reach out to me again in November. This is when we're looking at this category, and building a relationship with them so that, and also I think it's not a failure if someone doesn't want to take your product on now. If they say to you, listen, stuff's changed, we're all over the shop, but please reach out to us mid next year. We're interested. We loved the presentation. And being able to reach out to them and having my own little follow-up schedule with the info through the program, it just allows me to have used that program as a springboard to grow my business, which is obviously the absolute purpose of it.
Yep. And the thing is, all of your follow-up notes stay in your profile for the life of the account. So next year, when in the next session, when you're in meetings, if you met with them before, you could see go in and see your notes from the last meeting, 100%. And it just helps you track it. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. It's awesome. And it's great as well. Like, as you mentioned, even though the programs are passed, I've still got access to that platform, to all of the resources that are available to me. And of course, any follow-up, whether it be webinars or calls that I can take part of that I think are really relevant, all of it's sitting there for me to take advantage of.
Excellent. And so you're going to be on the shelves when? And you said April or?
So, as I said, we're already in a few stores in Southern California now.
But I mean from the session.
Oh, from the session, yeah. Coming on board March, April, and then some Northern California opportunities that came out of the session. We're planning on those for the beginning of Q2. So that's around about May, June. So, super, super excited about that. And I'm definitely going to shout it from the rooftops when it happens.
Well, we'll do a little follow-up on there. You send us some pictures of it on the shelves, and that'll be a nice way to close the loop. So, all right. Last question. What is coming up for Frost Popsicles?
What is coming up? So, I think our main focus very much at the moment is, now that things seem to have settled a little bit with COVID, just in terms of the wholesale space, it's really driving forward our objective to be call it the popsicle of choice in our category, starting first with our home state in California and very much growing from there. And some really exciting stuff that we're focusing on is looking into local co-packing opportunities, so that we can be super responsive on small volume orders, on private label, and we'd love to do some really cool holiday stuff. I mean, who wouldn't like a spiced pumpkin latte pop, with a little warm alcoholic twist around about Thanksgiving and Christmas time. So our main sort of business proposition is we got to keep innovating. We want to keep the public excited, and we want to be the guys that do it differently and better. So follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Frost Popsicles USA. And obviously our website is frostpopsicles.com, and so excited for what this year has to hold.
Excellent. Well, I wish you all the best, and I look forward. I will check you out during the next session I think it's March or April, one of those.
Yes, definitely. And I'll see you tomorrow, obviously, on the certifications call with Abby.
Looking forward to it. Thank you again for everything.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me.